Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking something truly fascinating, the neurobiology of trauma and how a single intentional breath has the actual power to rewire the human brain. Specifically, we're going to focus on how mindfulness meditation fundamentally reduces and dismantles post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. We've got an incredible source document guiding us today, centered around a groundbreaking pilot study. It explores a highly targeted mindfulness technique and its profound effects on individuals dealing with severe trauma. So let's jump right in.
So let's kick things off with a pretty big question. How in the world does a simple breathing technique actually dismantle severe PTSD in literally one of the most stressful environments on Earth? We're talking about a rigorous study conducted inside a federal prison that yielded absolutely incredible results. When we think of mindfulness, we usually picture serene retreat centers or quiet yoga studios. But to truly test if mindfulness can reduce PTSD, this researcher took the practice into a high-stakes, maximum stress environment. And let me tell you, the results completely challenge how we view trauma recovery.
Part 1. The reality of PTSD, trauma behind bars.
Look, the reality of federal prisons is that individuals there are exposed to staggering levels of trauma, violence, and isolation. Biologically speaking, that kind of environment forces the body into a relentless state of chronic stress, which just sends your cortisol levels through the roof. And here's the thing about cortisol. You can think of it like an acid that slowly erodes the brain's physiological resources over time. That prolonged hormonal imbalance is literally toxic. It damages the hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that handles mood and memory, and it traps people in these horrific negative thought loops of severe anxiety and flashbacks. So we're not just talking about an emotional struggle here. This is a profound biological hijacking of the brain.
Moving on to Part 2, the single breath returning to resting point.
So what's the actual intervention? It's called the single breath returning to resting point, or SBRRP for short. This is a mindfulness-based meditation technique with deep roots in Buddhist philosophy, specifically the Anapanasati and Mahasatipatthana teachings. Basically, it uses a single breath to find a physical focal point in the body to cultivate this non-judgmental awareness. Now, I know that sounds almost too simple, right? But it actually acts as an incredibly powerful bridge between ancient wisdom and modern clinical psychology. It anchors the traumatized mind and acts as a circuit breaker for those constant swirling traumatic thoughts to establish a reliable internal state of equilibrium.
Which brings us to Part 3, rewiring the traumatized brain, the biological mechanism.
To understand why this works, you have to look at the autonomic nervous system. On one side, you've got the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight, flight, or freeze response. It's high cortisol, a racing heart, constant hypervigilance. It's essentially where PTSD lives. On the flip side, you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest state. SBRRP acts as a literal physiological lever. It uses the breath to force your body to downshift from that high-alert panic mode straight into deep relaxation. It proves we can consciously take the wheel of our own internal nervous system. And honestly, it gets even better, because the brain structurally adapts. If you practice mindfulness regularly, it literally decreases the volume of the amygdala. That's your brain's fear center. It physically shrinks it. At the same time, it beefs up the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive control and logical thinking. Plus, it changes how the default mode network, or DMN, connects. The DMN is what's active when your mind wanders, which, for a trauma survivor, usually means ruminating on really painful memories. By shrinking the fear center, boosting executive control, and quieting that DMN, the brain is physically rewiring itself to stop obsessive, trauma-induced mind wandering. How amazing is that?
Okay, Part 4, proof from the inside, the federal prison study.
So researchers led by Dr. Arvind Sita took 41 incarcerated individuals at a federal correctional institution in Victorville, California, and had them undergo a 9-week SBRRP intervention. They did weekly group sessions and practiced the technique daily on their own. Now, think about this logically for a second. If a breathing technique can effectively dial down PTSD in a federal prison, a place literally defined by constant, inescapable stress, that is a massive breakthrough for trauma treatment across the board. It is the ultimate stress test for mindfulness. And the researchers didn't just ask them how they felt. They used rigorous, standardized psychological measurements. We're talking the PCL-5 for PTSD and the DAS, which measures depression, anxiety, and stress. The results? A dramatic, statistically significant plummet in severe PTSD and depression scores after just weeks of practice. Just weeks. The data gives us undeniable proof of a massive reduction in the mental health burdens these individuals were carrying.
But they didn't stop at measuring the negative symptoms. They also tracked the positive gains using the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale, or MAAS, which tracks your open, receptive awareness of the present moment. And those scores, they soared. This confirms that these folks weren't just feeling less stressed. They were actively building a heightened, non-judgmental awareness of their own minds. They were cultivating real emotional regulation and resilience to fill the space that trauma used to occupy.
All right, our final section, actionable takeaways. Breathe, feel, and release. So how can we actually use this? The source material breaks SBRP down into something super accessible called the OFR framework. Observe, feel, and release. Step 1. Observe. You set an intention, watch your natural breath, and find your body's physical resting point. Maybe that's your chest, your shoulders, or your stomach right at the end of an exhale. Step 2. Feel. You just acknowledge any inner tension or stress. No judgment, you literally just notice it's there. Finally, step 3. Release. You imagine that tension leaving your body with a purposeful sigh or a long exhale. By breaking it down into these 3 simple steps, you can actively dismantle anxiety in real time, no matter where you are or what you're doing. Dr. Arun Sita summed up the goal perfectly when he described the result of this technique as achieving a temporary stress-free state. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to solve all your life's problems in one single meditation session. You just need to use your breath to create a momentary sanctuary of calm. And the secret is, when you string enough of those temporary stress-free states together, you actually begin to rewire your brain, shrink that fear center, and permanently loosen the grip of trauma.
We've looked at the fascinating neurobiology of healing today. We've seen undeniable statistical proof from one of the toughest, most stressful environments imaginable that mindfulness meditation fundamentally reduces PTSD. The science is completely clear, the evidence is robust, and hey, the tool is completely free. So armed with all this knowledge, the only question left to ask is, how are you going to use your very next breath? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep breathing, and we'll see you next time.